Welcome to episode 289 of the Working Fans Podcast, where you're about to hear my mic quality.
But we have to talk about in wrestling, and the quality of our mics is brought to you by Game Up Hard Hydration. It's like your favorite sports drink and your favorite seltzer teamed up, became such a better creation with 4.9 ABV. Dave, give him that tail of the tape.
That's right, guys. It's only 110 calories, low carb. You don't have to worry about it. And guys, you also got 4 great flavors here: fruit punch, orange, lemon lime, and grape. Enjoy yourself some Game Up and enjoy us.
We have a lot of good reviews to bring you this week, and we will start with AEW Revolution. We gave you the preview last week. Dave, overall, what did you think about this card?
I liked it overall. I didn't care. I'm really done with this Death Rider storyline. I think I echo a lot of people when I say that, but yeah, I'm just really done with that. I actually was rooting for Christian Cage to cash in and get the title. I know some people didn't want to see that, but I just want to break it up. I want to break that up a little bit. I enjoyed the women's match a lot. I think, Mariah May and I think Toni Storm have just killed it so far. Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher had a great cage match. Everybody loved that. Although I do have to say, all right, and this is where, and I'm not just taking AEW to task for this. I'm taking all of wrestling for task for this, but this cage match shined the light on it to me a little bit. We had 2 of them this week, but there's a point where people are just getting hit in the head with screwdrivers and stuff, and everybody just keeps kicking out. Like, I mean, I'm so sick of that aspect of like modern wrestling. Like, I was watching some old wrestling, and people hit like a pile driver or a superplex and got the pin. And I'm like, wow. Like, you mean you didn't have to like drive a sledgehammer to the guy? You didn't have to, run him over with a car? Like, come on, So it's like, so for that aspect, I'm nitpicking a little bit. I grade things on a curve with modern wrestling, but yeah. I overall though, I did like the show. I thought it was a good show. I just would have liked to see Moxley drop the belt. I didn't expect him to, but I would have liked to see it. And I will say this, because you might talk about this because you watched the 0 Hour, the Big Boom, Justice, AJ, all that jazz. It does feel very Vince WWE like at times.
Yeah, I thought AJ looked better in the first match around. This one I cared less about, and I was less impressed by. I mean, if you want to talk about something I was even more less impressed by, we kind of called it with the Chris Jericho match. Did you catch any of those highlights? And are you down with this angle, or do you find it as silly as I do?
I thought it came out of nowhere, because, oh God, I'm blanking out. Who would take the mask off?
Gravity,
thank you. Like, we've done nothing with this guy, and suddenly we're just, laying him out, running to try to do this serious angle with his family, and it just came out of the blue. I don't know. Maybe it's a thing they're trying to get.
That he's Bandito's brother, and that Jericho's trying to get at Bandito by going after his brother. But like, I don't even think that's been established as much.
No.
We haven't seen Gravity in a while. We haven't seen Bandito, and it could be a good feud, but I just feel like it's really getting laid out poorly for my enjoyment.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think when I look back at these predictions, I think I nailed almost all of them except for Swerve. I think I picked Nana to interfere, and I was watching the show, and I realized I blanked out that was a number 1 contenders match. And when I remembered that, I'm like, oh, Swerve has to win because Mox is going to win later. So I guess what I'm saying is I do feel at times AEW's gotten almost a little too predictable, where like I also know where we're going a lot of times.
100%. They really had the long show again. Watching this live, I just made it up to the Swerve and Ricochet match. I, like you, really enjoyed that ladies match. I feel like that over-delivered.
Yeah.
And for all the criticism we give AEW, that women's feud has to be one of the best feuds in a long while in all of wrestling.
Yeah, definitely. It's in the top 5 for sure this year. Like when you look at like all the feuds in the last couple of years too, it's up there. So
definitely. And if you want to talk about feuds, Dave put up an interesting comparison recently.
yeah.
And that is the Faces of Fear versus the Samoan SWAT team. I love this because I've been playing a lot of WWE 2K25, and there's just so much Samoan lineage in there. But when you look at these two teams, Warlord and the Barbarian, hard-hitting, known as tough guys, and then you've got the Samoan SWAT team, the Head Shrinkers, these guys also tough in the ring. This is, kind of a coin flip for who could win. Dave, what puts one team over the other one for you?
First off, I'm going to have to correct you a little bit there. You said Warlord and Barbarian. Obviously, this is Ming, a.k.a. Haku, and Barbarian, the Faces of Fear. The Powers of Pain was a great team as well.
Good call.
Yeah, I'm a Samoan SWAT team guy when I look at the resume of how decorated they are. I also look at, like, if you're talking about in-ring ability, just the way they work together as a team. I thought they were a little more cohesive, but man, Powers. Now I'm doing it. Faces of Fear are a really, really underrated team, in my opinion, because I don't think they were ever giving the push they probably deserved. Like, you look at Barbarian in this time period, like, he was hitting belly-to-belly suplexes off the top rope. He was flying off the top rope with headbutts. And, these two were very good in the ring, and they never quite got their due. I'm going to give it bell-to-bell to the Samoan SWAT team, but I will say the other interesting aspect would have been who would have won in a street fight. If that's the case, I always put my money on whoever is Ming's side's on, so Faces of Fear.
Oh, 100%. I obviously more familiar with the Samoan SWAT team, so I would have to pick them. But Meng has just that, that aura in wrestling of being a tough guy. Barbarian, just as tough. Either way, this would be a very hard-hitting tag team match.
For sure.
And I've got Samoans on the mind because I dug more into WWE 2K25 this week. I'm up to about 26 hours played on the PlayStation 5. And the more I go through that showcase mode, I love the classic teams. I just got the Head Shrinkers recently. I just got Appa and Sika recently playing through. I am currently on that War Games Civil War that we had recently. So they're really featuring this current storyline huge. It's highly enjoyable. Playing more around on the island. It's fun to be in that free roaming game area. Sometimes the matches feel a little repetitive. Like, there's this one thing where you have to keep going around and finding R-Truth because he pops up at different places on the island. But it's very fun to play, getting a little more into the faction mode. It's a little in-game card game they have. And if you haven't picked up 2K25, there's a lot of talk still about glitches on social media. I've run into some here or there, but not enough that would make me say, don't pick up this game. I highly recommend. And if we're talking about things we're highly recommending, Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling this weekend had their Mayhem event, which was 2 shows, March 14th and 15th. Today, we are going to talk about March 14th, and we will talk about the next night, another night. But before we go through this match by match, what did you think of their second presentation overall?
I just really like the video packages and the way it's produced, because it's got a real nostalgia feel to it, but it also doesn't look minor leagues. It looks like on the level of, at the very least, like a TNA, AEW type promotion. Obviously, the venue, the crowds might be a little smaller, but I mean, it looks good. Like, it looks good, and they have a lot of the old footage when they're showing footage of guys like Flair and Race and stuff. And then, the commentary team. You got Morrow, Veda Scott, D'Lo Brown. The last show they had Don Callis, who couldn't make it this time. But yeah, it just looks very well produced.
Now, what do you think about some of the matches they had on this? I'll start with the first one that really caught my eye. They kicked off the show with Kushida and Kevin Knight versus QT Marshall and Blake Christian. I thought this was a great match to kick the card off with. You know, you want to start hot, especially with the next match they had coming up after this. But I loved seeing Kushida and Kevin Knight get the win, and that would lead to a match for night 2.
Yes. They'll be taking on the Kingdom on night 2. And what I liked about this was they set it up as this tag match. You know, the winners, this was going to go on. We're going to have a main event match on night 2, you know, so they're making night 2, you know, feel big. And this is another thing too. I like the idea of guys like Kushida, Taven, Bennett, Kevin Knight. They're all going to get a chance to feel like, you know, they're main eventers here too.
Definitely. And the show definitely hit a lull for me. I'm not going to go by every match, but I had to bring up this next match because it started off with Johnny Swinger coming out, renaming himself Johnny the Swingman Parisi, and teaming with a lot of great talent that I've really only seen in Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, maybe a little bit in TNA, and that's people like Raj Singh, Rohit Raju, Rohan Raja. On the other team, you got Bhupinder Gujar, Psycho Mike, El Reverso, and Billy Gunn. This, if I were more familiar with all these guys, it would have made an 8-man tag more exciting. But there's a lot of good talent on here, and this was a good enough match, I thought.
Yeah, it was interesting. Psycho Mike is like the master of like the body slam. He just like body slams on top of people. I got a kick out of that. You know, good to see Billy Gunn out here, who hasn't been on AEW lately. So, yeah, it's funny because we'll be reviewing an upcoming Raw soon, and I just saw Billy Gunn, and it's like, oh my God, like he's bigger than ever at like 60-something years old. Like he's way bigger than he was in his 20s. He moved around a lot better in his early 20s, but yeah, it's interesting to see. Let's talk about this next match though. Kylie Ray, Zoe Zager, former guest of the show, and this was not only a tournament quarterfinals for the women's tournament, but also it was a WWE ID match, as both these ladies are WWE ID performers, and I thought that was kind of cool that they announced that.
Yeah, I thought this was the best match yet. It really kind of picked up the pace after that 8-man tag. And like you said, seeing Zoe Sager, a former guest of the show, who went on to become an ID talent in this WWE ID versus ID talent on a Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling show. This is what started to get me to think this is why I was excited about AEW so early on, because they would work with other companies. They would feature indie talent that you might not get to see anywhere. And this match just had me, I popped huge for it. I wrote best match yet with a question mark next to it in my notes.
Yep. Then we had a gentleman I'm not too familiar with, but he was really talented.
Actually, before you go on to the next match, before this, they announced the Maple Leaf Pro Northern Rising show, which is going to take place at the former Maple Leaf Gardens. And that's the video package for their next event that featured such classic footage. And it got you really excited for the event because they're showing you the history of Canadian wrestling and featuring that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. That's the stuff I'm talking about in the beginning. Yeah, like I just love the video packages and I love the way they're building things. And we'll talk about that too later with some of these matches. Even this match, there was a storyline here. Sheldon Jean, was that his name?
Sheldon Jean.
Yeah, where he had not been picked, you know, by Noah and somebody's. What's that?
I think it was Sheldon Jean because I thought they were spelling Jean a different way.
Yes, Sheldon Jean. But I'm not familiar with these two, but they were both very talented.
I've seen Kaito Kiyomiya a couple times, I think, on New Japan. He is the Noah GHC champion. And this is another match where the video package before the match helped me get excited for the match because I didn't know that these two had a story going back, and it made me more exciting for the match. And this match was awesome. I thought it was like, I liked Zoe Sager, Kylie Ray a little bit more, but I still really enjoyed this match. And I hope these guys do more in Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling.
What about the 6-way scramble for the Jericho Cruise Oceanic Championship?
I'm going to be honest. I thought Rich Swann won this at first. And even when they said a different name, I'm like, no way, that's Rich Swann. And then I looked and I'm like, that is definitely not Rich Swann.
That's Mo Jabari, Kid Chocolate, pal.
I thought I'd get that out of the way early. It was a good enough match. I didn't know there was a Jericho Cruise Oceanic Championship. I'm familiar with a couple of these guys, Rich Swann, Stu Grayson, Ishimori. Good enough match, but it was kind of one of those ones that I was like, all right, this is something different. I like that they're featuring a different title.
Absolutely. And Michael Allen Richard Clark was one of the other guys. He ended up jumping Jabari after the win and running his mouth. And then we had PCO come out and he beat up Michael Allen Richard Clark. I think Morrow made a fun of that too, how many names he had. But that sets up a match for night 2 between PCO and Clark. And it was a fun match for what it was. We moved on. Mr. Check Your DMs, Alex Zane and Mike Bennett. It's an inside joke for me and Joe. Mike Bennett gets the victory. And we're kind of plugging night 2 that Mike Bennett's going to be in the main event with his partner Matt Taven against the Jet Setters.
Yeah, this was another great match. Mike Bennett eking out the win, but this is like on the level with that ladies match I thought earlier where they really kicked it up a notch. And they went from this to Tom Latimer backstage. And since, NWA has been off YouTube, it's been harder to keep up with them. So I haven't been as familiar with this Tom Latimer run. But this interview had me excited for that match, ready to watch it. And talking about titles, they're setting up this ladies tournament where Giselle Shaw got the win tonight. And that sets up Kylie Ray versus Taylor Rising tomorrow, as well as Giselle Shaw and Serena Deeb for night 2. And we're going to compare night 1 to night 2, Dave, because when they started reading off this night 2 lineup, I thought on paper it looked better. You've got, as we talked about, the 2 ladies matches. You got Bhupinder Gujar, El Reverso, and Mike Rollins versus QT Marshall, Blake Christian, and Sheldon Jean. Hito Kiyomura versus Alex Zane versus Ishimori. I think that's going to steal the show for night 2. PCO versus Michael A.R. Clark, like you were talking about in that street fight. The Kingdom versus Kushida in night. And then you have Rohan Raja and Rich Swann announced for the PWA Champions Grail. And then Billy Gunn, Bishop Dwyer versus Tom Latimer, Matt Cardona. When I saw that, I'm like, wow, they went all out for night 2, huh?
Yeah, Bishop Dyer is former Baron Corbin, by the way. And one great thing I would say, I'm thinking night 2 got a little bit of a bigger show. But one thing I did like also about this show too was there were also video packages, not just on Tom Latimer, but also Bishop Dyer. There was also interview with Bishop Dyer. And then right before this main event, where Bishop Dyer takes on Tom Latimer, we have a nice video package, almost like a boxing or UFC type thing, where we're looking at, both stories here of Dyer and Latimer and their road. And they talk about how these two knew each other in developmental, 20 years ago, and they took different routes. And, one thing I feel like, I think maybe since Nick Aldis left even, the NWA is, Nick took a lot of that prestige with that NWA title with him, the suits and all that. Having the NWA title defended on Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling made the NWA title feel bigger to me. And I like that aspect of of this. Overall, I thought the match was fine. Latimer, ends up poking the eye, using the ropes and doing what he can to get a victory. And so Latimer kind of comes a heel at the very end of this a little bit, which, kind of gives me some interest in night 2. But I thought overall, though, I really liked the presentation here.
Yeah, NWA has always been good about their production and video packages and putting together, packages that make you want to see that main event. And this was a great hard-hitting main event. Bishop Dwyer still, to me, kind of has that WWE style, because he's talking about breaking out on his own now, doing things his way. And I didn't see too much difference, but I am excited to see what else he will do, because we've had the Bloodsport match. We've had this, and, it's just exciting to see how he progresses.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about progression, Dave, I'm going to ask, did you watch Evolve this week, and what did you think?
No. I got nothing. You tell me, what did you think?
Oh, wow. Week 1 put you off that much. It's getting a little better, but it's going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be NXT light. You're going to get the people that aren't quite ready for NXT, or that you've seen on NXT that got bumped down to Evolve. Like, for instance, this week, the main event, Riley Osborne versus Oro Mensah. And it was announced at the top of the show that both these people are members of the Evolve roster now. So it's almost like an AEW ROH type thing, it almost seems. I'm currently watching a match with Wendy Chu versus a newcomer, Aria Bennett. So you're getting almost, I think, what they hoped from NXT in the beginning, where it'd be a developmental league, and then you'll have some more established stars coming down. And not even the most established stars, because I wouldn't say Wendy Chu has all that much experience, but I still find it interesting. I would call it a C+, B- show at best still, but we're only 2 weeks in. I'm going to stay with it because I'm very excited for it. Almost excited as this next choice you gave us between Ron Simmons and Too Cold Scorpio. This is great because these were 2 of my favorites in WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Scorpio was always that high-flying guy. He would team with Benoit. He would face Benoit. And then Ron Simmons, obviously, winning that WCW championship was a big deal back then. You had him in Doom with Butch Reed.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to kind of compare them because they're 2 different styles in the ring. But when you are forced to choose between them, who do you like?
Well, also, one little side note, I was thinking about this. I didn't think about this when I did this, but I can't remember the team, but Ron Simmons, in storyline at least, he brought Too Cold Scorpio to WCW. Ron Simmons used Too Cold as a mystery partner in a match at one of the Clash of Champions. And that was the first time I saw that 450 splash that Too Cold like to do. Boy, I'll tell you what. Overall, like in the ring, if you like, athleticism and, being a dynamic competitor, you can't really go wrong with Too Cold Scorpio. But I was watching that show LFG a couple weeks ago, and, they were grading on the match of 2 people. And Shawn Michaels said that, one of the guys did better because it came down to him. And he said that, but this guy's got the better look. And sometimes, the presentation and, the look overrides talent. And I feel like even though both these guys are talented, when you look at the presentation of a Ron Simmons, especially in his prime in this era, I mean, it just spells main event. It spells money. So I go with Simmons.
Yeah, I'd say if you asked me this when I was younger, I would probably say Too Cold Scorpio just because of the flashy moves, because of his style in the ring. But looking at it over the years, Ron Simmons really just does stand out. That power, that, force that he brings in the ring. He just has that main event star feel, and I think that's followed him throughout his career. So I'm going to have to go Ron Simmons as well. And NXT Roadblock was this week. It was much hyped because it was in the theater at Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
You had Obafemi versus Moose. You had Nathan Frazier and Axiom versus the Hardys.
Mhm.
What did you think of this show overall? Because I really loved it. I had to catch up with it a couple days later, but when I watched it, I was like, NXT is really killing it with a team up with TNA like this.
Yes, one of my favorite shows in a while, honestly. And I like NXT, but this was a really, really good show. This Hardy's Faxium match, Faxium work their ass off here. Like, I like the Hardys, but clearly they're a little bit older now, and they looked like $1,000,000. And you cannot say a big part of that wasn't Nathan Frazier and Axiom just, bumping like crazy, taking absolutely crazy bumps. This was a show kind of like AEW that I kind of felt like I knew the results, but it still felt really good because the presentation was so good and the matches were good, but they didn't overstay its welcome, right? Like, it was paced very well. Jordan Grace, Roxanne Perez was like the next match, right? And I like this at this point, right? I'm watching this show and I'm realizing, like, I love how women wrestling is just such a big part of this. Like, Grace and Perez aren't even the champions. It's a top contenders match. And then Obafemi and Moose is like just the irremovable force versus the irresistible object, as Gorilla Monsoon would say, right? It was just such a presentation. Javon Evans, Ethan Page was great. I thought it was the best they did to put Javon Evans over. And Stephanie Vaquer, I had heard the rumors that Julia was injured and that she would probably drop in the belt. That made sense to me because this match kind of came out of nowhere. But at the end of it, too, after a very good match, they're dropping the confetti, and Stephanie's got both titles. I thought, all right, we've just made this woman even a bigger star now, too, and we're building her towards potentially Jordan Grace, it looks like.
Yeah, this show just knocked it out of the park all around. It was probably the high point of the week for me. And I didn't catch Smackdown this week, but I did hear a bit of news from it.
Yes.
And frankly, I'm excited because they had a couple promos pop up, one of which being this. Did you watch SmackDown? What did you think of the promo?
So I watched SmackDown. I didn't actually end up seeing this. I'd have to go back and watch it. I don't know if when I was fast forwarding commercials, because I was watching on delay, did I miss this? But I saw this afterwards. This, and apparently there was one with a 4 that looked mysterious as well, that people think might be Aleister Black. And of course, this is really hinting, I believe, at Rey Fenix. So I don't know, man. I mean, like, it's funny because WWE is just cooking right now. It's got so much great talent. And AEW, even though we're talking about, has so much talent, I just wonder, it's like, man, like, what are these guys going to do when they get here? Phoenix will team up with Penta, I'd imagine.
Maybe at some point. Right now, they've got him on SmackDown, so it appears at the moment like they're going to be two separate superstars. I'm kind of surprised Phoenix isn't going right to NXT, but he's definitely main roster worthy. And think about it. You can build up Penta and Phoenix separately to be such big stars. And then when they do team, it could blow the roof off the place.
Well, let me ask you something, though, because, again, I missed this. I skipped it. Did it say Phoenix was coming to SmackDown, or did this vignette just air on SmackDown? Because if it just aired, maybe it's going to air on Raw, too.
SmackDown, which I believe the Penta promos aired on Raw beforehand. So there's nothing.
We'll find out. Yeah. We will find out.
But yeah, that was quite exciting seeing who else might come. And if you want to get excited about something, there's only one drink in the game to get excited about. I don't even have to say their name because you already know.
If you haven't tried Game Up, then you are missing out. Imagine your favorite seltzer and your favorite sports drink had a baby, but it's way better than that. Each can is 110 calories, low carb, 4.9 ABV. It's a nice light drink that is not light on flavor. Game Up comes in fruit punch, orange, lemon, lime, and grape. Pick it up at drinkgameup.com or at your nearest liquor store. Author Ray Lopez presents Lockup, professional wrestling in our world. Lockup dives headfirst into the colorful world of professional wrestling. Explore the iconic characters, careers, matches, history, and families, and delve into the bizarre and fascinating entwining of professional wrestling and film, television, football, politics, gender, and race. Pre-orders are available now on Amazon.com or at MascotBooks.com. This is the perfect gift for the wrestling fan in your life. Pick up a copy today on Amazon.com or at MascotBooks.com.
Hey, all you got young wrestling fans out there, listen, Old Black Bart has got a book. It's called Wrestle. Black Bart. It's got some dead good stories in there about some dead good wrestlers.
Read stories of Dusty Rhodes, the Von Erich, Scott Casey, Sergeant Slaughter, Roddy Piper, Mr. Fuji, Ron Bass, Bruiser Brody, Mike Davis, the Grappler, and many others.
And I guarantee you one thing, that it'll be the best dadgum read you've had in a long time.
Get your book today at Russellville.com or on Amazon. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.
Hey fans, it's the man they call Dave with producer Joe, and you probably know us as the commentary team for New Heights Pro Wrestling, but when we're not doing that, we got a podcast.
That is the Working Fans Podcast, where we talk pro wrestling, comedy, MMA, and so much more.
And tell them about that signature segment.
Oh, you talk about the 531?
You know I am.
That is a homegrown creation that has been our namesake. And if you want to know our namesake, we got Chevy, AJ Strange Brew, as well as the two of us.
And why don't you go to our channel, like, subscribe, show us some love.
Rate, review, all of it.
Read about the Northern Wrestling Federation in the book presented by Russellville.com, The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 2. Hear the story of Roger Ruffin, the man who trained Carl Anderson, the Monster Abyss, Jordan Clearwater, Chris Harrison, Jillian Hall.
Plus 45 other short stories, including Jazz, Bobby Eaton, Kamala, Thunder Rosa, Mario Mancini, Scott Casey, PJ Black, Kerry Morton, Sal Renaro, Jeremiah Plunkett, Colby Carino, Bam Bam Malone, and many others.
Get your book today at Russellville.com. Russellville, it's where wrestling lives.